Hello, my name is Frank. Thank you for purchasing my table saw repair kit. This video is going to cover the installation and adjustment of the switch and the fan. um, Unfortunately, I'm unable to make a full-length video. I know I've talked about it, but I just simply don't have the time. And I think that doing it in segments might actually be better for everybody. Um, But without wasting anyone's time, let's just get into this. Um, I'm going to address a couple issues first. One is this red cap. On the T2, it's not included on the saw. On the T1, it may or may not be on there. I've had like one or two people tell me that they went to take the red cap off and it kind of threw them in a loop. They didn't have one and they're like, what do I do? Just don't worry about it. It's only a shaft protector. It's not a vital component of the saw. I failed to say that in the manual, other than it may or may not be applicable, whatever that means, I suppose. So that's the first thing I want to address. I'm going to give a little bit of background about how the saw starts without getting too detailed because it's not the point of the video. There's the starting switch that's located right here. And when the saw is in the off state, or when you just turn it on for about the first millisecond or two, it's in this closed position here. When it's in the closed position, current is allowed to flow through it, and the electricity flows to the starting capacitor, which looks like this, supplied in the kit. And it goes through and it finds its way into the start windings, which helps start the saw. After the motor reaches what's known as a synchronous speed, which is about 80% of the maximum speed of the motor, this centrifugal mechanism that's built into the fan will open and release a clutch. That in turn opens up that starting switch, and that stops current flow through the switch. There's two cases that result from an improperly adjusted switch fan. That is the case where the saw fails to start, and a case where the saw starts, but the capacitor blows and releases smoke. The case where this blows and releases smoke is when the switch stays closed, allowing current to flow through it longer than necessary. Electricity should only go through this switch for about a second. Anything longer, about 4 seconds, and this thing will go. And these are very resilient capacitors, but no matter how you make them, they are not designed for continuous use. They have a little valve, pressure relief valve, that white cap, and when too much electricity flows through this, or for too long, and it gets hot, it will pop that little cap, releasing smoke, so this doesn't turn into a projectile. So it's a safety feature designed into the capacitor. I've had one case where this has blown, and the saw still started, which really surprised me, and it actually had me scratching my head, because usually when these blow, it's the end. But I guess they're very, very well built. I definitely chose the right company to supply capacitors in the kit. The first instance that I had mentioned was the saw not starting. Again, if you're dealing with the original capacitor, it's probably the capacitor and not the switch. But I've supplied the switch in the kit because I found that the factory switch is inferior in material choice, and I figured I wanted to sell a product that would have very little callbacks. But in order to get there, things need to be installed correctly, and accidents happen, and I'm fine to help you out if that does. The first case, the switch wasn't closed, the saw wouldn't start, and that's when you have to, in the manual in revision 5 or 6, I believe it's 5, the switch has to be moved over onto that metal tab where you don't see that white plunger. The instance now that I've had is where the saw starts but the capacitor blows. With that gentleman, I found that the fan wasn't actually installed correctly, but I still sent him out a new capacitor, and a new washer as well. There was issues with that. I'm not going to get into details. I'm not going to say anybody's names, but accidents happen. That's fine. We're human beings, no problem. And that's how I make improved manuals. So, for success, there's got to be failure. So, before I get into this and show you how to remove the fan and how to adjust the switch, I'm going to first tell everybody I'm using a video camera on my phone. I don't have any other means to record, and I certainly don't have the time or money to buy a camera, but we'll move forward with that in time, making do with what I have. So, if you would bear with me a second. We're now underneath the table saw. As you see, I've moved the camera. I might need to move it up a little closer. Let's see here. Let me pause you. All right, that's a little bit better. Now, this is the starting switch, and this is the fan. We're first going to start with the fan, removing it. I'm going to put this cover back on, so this way we could all be on the same page. So you're going to remove the red cap, or if you have the T2, you don't have to worry about it. You're going to remove the fan cover by pulling on it. If you can't get it off, maybe your fingers don't fit or whatever the situation is, you could just get your screwdriver in there and, like down here in the crack there, and kind of try to pry it off. Now, I can't really see what I'm doing because I'm working from above, but we'll just remove that. Now, I find that it's easiest to remove the fan by grabbing it and kind of pulling on it a little bit, not too hard, and releasing these little tabs. They got these longer tabs here that stick out. You just need to lift them a little bit. You don't have to, completely bend them off. We don't want to break them. If you do that, then you'll have to buy a new fan, and I don't supply these. This is a manufacturer's part. But we just release them a little bit, work your way around. There's no rush. If you're patient, it'll come right off, just like that. Now, in the factory, there would be 2 washers that would be stuck on the shaft. Sometimes they fall off. And the 2 washers are rubberized cork. The problem with the rubberized cork is the friction causes the rubber to smoke or fail, and it'll fall apart. So I've addressed it with this material. This is a 95% wool, so if you're allergic to wool, don't sniff it, wash your hands, or have someone else handle it. Wool is naturally flame resistant. This, as you can see, I've used this saw and it's still white. It's abrasion resistant. It's everything. This is a fantastic material for this application. I do want to make note that I cut these by hand. I do punch out the center with a tool, but I cut the major diameter by hand for now until I actually make my own punch from some pipe. This doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't affect operation. However, it's good to make sure that it's installed correctly here. The alignment in the center is not crucial. It's mostly the outer diameter. I also want to note that on these pieces of felt is a piece of paper that comes on the back. It's a release paper, because these are what are known as a PSA type felt. That is pressure sensitive adhesive. So one side has adhesive and it's pressure sensitive. The issue is sometimes when you peel off the release paper, you will take the adhesive with it. If that starts to happen, don't keep pulling on it. Find another spot, pick. You want to keep the adhesive on here. If you take the adhesive off, then you're either going to have to buy a special type of double-sided 3M adhesive, or you'd have to contact me for replacement. And believe me, the felt is actually pretty expensive, especially because it's made in the United States. Now, you're going to take off the rubberized cork washers that would otherwise be here, and you're going to toss them. You could put them in your scrap bin, use them for something. You're going to clean the black disc that's on here. You just need to get the sawdust off. You want the felt pad to stick firmly on this part. We also want to test that it works by doing this. So as you see, this clutch plate with the felt washer will pop in. That does occur when this fan reaches 80% of the maximum speed of the motor. These little weights here pop out. We're going to put this to the side. Now, here is a lever-based plate. And if you push on it, you could hear a click. Hopefully, you're not picking up the clock in the background, but there's a click that occurs from the switch. When this is pushed all the way in, the switch is closed, current flows through it to the capacitor. And when you let go of it, current ceases to conduct through the switch. Now, we're going to now address the switch with the fan off because it'll be a lot easier to test this without the fan on. If the fan is still on, you could still test it. What you'd have to do is take the cover off and squeeze out the mechanisms. So you would take the two mechanisms and move them to the side. Now, let me move the camera. Alrighty, now I've moved the camera. Hopefully you could see the switch. Right here is a space. As you see, the fan is missing. And because of that, the switch is opened and you could see the little white plunger. If you were to close this, white plunger disappears and you could hear an audible click from the switch when you move this little lever back and forth. When this plate is pushed all the way in, you want to hear that click. And when you release it, you want to hear a click as well. Now, I found that positioning the switch, it's in the optimal position when this piece here, this plate is pushed in all the way and you can't see the white plunger, or you could maybe just make it out. You don't want to have a large gap. If you have a large gap like this, when this plate is in all the way, the motor isn't going to start. It simply won't do that. To adjust this switch, you're going to take your screwdriver and you're going to loosen this upper screw. Now, there's two ways to adjust this. You can actually physically move the switch by loosening these two screws, or you could just move the whole assembly. Moving the assembly is more ideal. So you would loosen this screw here. Okay. And then with this switch, you can move it back and forth. Very little, you have a very minute movement, but you want to move it so that way it's all the way forward. Okay. Some of them from the factory were back, some of them were forward, but you want it all the way forward. So you move it forward with one hand, hold the position, and then tighten the screw. So I unfortunately only have two hands, so I will have to put my camera here and do that. So we're going to move this forward a little bit and cinch the screw down. And now we're going to check the alignment, positioning, by pushing this in, and you should hear it click, and then release it, and you should hear it click. This is as far as this is going to move when the fan is installed. Now, the first positioning with the switch closed is best done with the fan on. However, it's actually more important that the switch actually be able to open, because if the switch doesn't get any current, the motor simply won't start, nothing will happen, you'll just turn the saw off. But you don't want to blow the capacitors constantly. That's, can damage the saw, and it gets expensive sending capacitors out, and it's very wasteful. And besides, we want the saw to work. So the adjustment here that should take place is to the switch. There's nothing you could adjust here. Now, we're going to put the fan back on. Where did I put the fan? There we go. We're going to put the fan on. You can see it has a little flat spot. We're going to line it up. Now, shoot. Now, we're going to line this fan, and we're going to push this on. Now, it may require you to push a little harder to get it in there all the way. All right. And we're going to verify that it's on all the way by just giving it a little light tug. If it slips off, then most likely the tabs have been bent back a little too far. And all you'd have to do is take the fan off and bend the tabs in towards the center just a little bit for it to get a really, really snug fit. So as you see, the fan is on all the way. The tabs are properly seated in the machine groove of the rotor shaft or armature shaft. And, we'll spin this and see that everything works just fine. Now, to test this with the switch on, which in my opinion is more ideal, but, doing it both ways is safe, is you're just going to spread these open, and you should hear the audible click from the switch. If you don't hear an audible click when you open this, you'd need to adjust the switch back in that direction a little bit. If you were to open it and close it, you should hear it click twice. Once on open, once on close. That would be properly adjusted. Once you verify that this has been positioned and adjusted correctly and the fan is on securely, you could put the cover back on. And if you have the red cap, you can screw your red cap back on. And then you would reattach the wires. In the manual, I have the installation of the switch prior to the TVS. Just to note, what the transient voltage suppressor actually does is it protects the switch. It really just extends the life of the switch. It provides an alternative current path in the event of an arc which is formed within the switch. It's a natural phenomenon, and this I've determined this was the most effective way at reducing arcing to extend the life of the switch and in turn extend the life of the starting capacitor. So I'm going to pause the video one more time. As you see, I've moved the camera. So I'm going to add a couple notes about the switch and about how this works. I'm going to grab a switch. We have one here. They're made in Poland. Very difficult to find switches made in the United States. For some reason, nobody really wants to make them. As you can hear, it makes an audible click. That's what we're after. You want to make sure that the fan is installed correctly. It's imperative. So, unfortunately, if you accidentally install this, ultimately I shouldn't be responsible. But I'm a woodworker too, and I like people to be happy, so I send out new capacitors. But just do your best to make sure it's installed correctly. If you are unsure, you can always contact me, send me a photograph before the cover's on, and I can verify that it's installed correctly. But I will most likely have some photo images in the manual that you can refer to. I know that most people are visual learners. I can go any way when it comes to learning, but I do recognize that some people are, reading an instruction manual, they don't want to do it, and I don't blame them. But it is imperative they read the manual. There's a lot of safety information, yes, but there is detailed information on how to install this, and it's really not as difficult as the manual seems. It's just new information to people. So that should conclude the video. Just make sure that you're if you were looking at the switch, your blue wires go here, your black wire goes on this one. This one here doesn't go anywhere. It's all on its own. And again, make sure the switch is positioned so when the fan is on this, and it's installed correctly, of course, it's on this plunger here pushed in all the way. We don't want to have any of the white plunger showing. And then if you were to spread open the weights in the fan for the centrifugal mechanism, you want to hear it click and you want to see that. If you don't see that, most likely you didn't actually install the fan correctly, because even if you have the switch pushed forward all the way, it actually will still release. There's only about 3 millimeters of movement in this plunger, at the most, actually. So I once again, I thank you for purchasing the kit. Not the best video in the world, but I don't think it's too shabby for an engineer. So if you have any questions, you can comment them on YouTube, or you can contact me through Facebook, or by email or mail if you prefer to write a letter. My information is in the last page of the installation manual at the bottom. And once again, I thank you and have fun.